Please, stop killing undocumented infants who are trying to cross the border of the birth canal in hopes of a better life. Every undocumented infant deserves a chance at the American dream. Spoken like a true idiot who has never experienced a parasite growing inside of him, literally eating him from the inside out, and which, if he survives the experience, will cost him thousands of pounds over the next quarter of a century or so. Whoop. There it is, boys. What we're talking about today.
Let the demonetization process begin!
We're not done talking about abortion on this channel, I'm afraid. At least, I'm not. I have much more to say on the issue of abortion. Mostly it has to do with this line of thought, that being the justification that certain people have a tendency to fall back on in an effort to justify abortions. This is kind of really out there on the totem pole, but it's something that needs to be addressed, I think. The contention I have is with this notion of a fetus being a parasite to the mother, unwanted or otherwise. This notion is touted as a method of putting aside one's feelings in the name of scientific reason. The comparison hinges on the basis that a fetus cannot feasibly survive on its own without its host, or the mother figure, and this is meant to be comparable to that of a tapeworm or a symbiotic certain Marvel character. It is meant to justify unequivocally on this basis abortions, because a fetus cannot survive on its own, hence making it a parasite. So if we're going to talk about parasites, I think we should know exactly what they are. A parasite is, quote, an organism that lives in or on an organism of another species, its host, and benefits by deriving nutrients at the other's expense. So that's the argument. The fetus cannot survive on its own, hence it needs the life force of the mother, hence it is a parasite. Only problem with that is, what about after the kid is born? How much more viable is a newborn infant than a fetus in the womb? Quantify that for me. Consider this. Just because they are viable outside of the womb does not mean that they can in fact survive on their own. That is, without the aid of someone else taking care of them. So, following that logic, does a child who is outside of the womb actually qualify as no longer being a parasite by their own standards of logic? I would argue not. And then of course there is something to be said about the fact that a parasite is supposed to be a different species from its host. So, the question, does a child outside of the womb quite qualify as not a parasite by their own standards? Those being that, it can't survive without something to help it. Not at all. It does not qualify as not a parasite. They still require someone to nourish them, to clothe them, to bathe them, to change them. They can't do anything for themselves for quite a while, and then even after that they have to be financially supported, otherwise they do die. Passing through the birth canal isn't an inherent rite of passage that suddenly leads a fetus immediately into self-sustainability. Not the way that you would imagine it. Meaning that a child, infant, newborn, would still qualify as a parasite if we accept this comparison that they're toting as gospel, which I'm not. You see, the crucial difference between a fetus and a parasite is that a parasite literally cannot live without a host to feed off of for the duration of its entire life. Whereas a fetus, on the other hand, will eventually become a self-sustaining organism within their life cycle. And when I say self-sustaining, I recognize that it's not quite the word that you want me to use. Self-sustaining in the sense that it can support itself, it can change itself, it can wipe itself, it can feed itself, eventually. That is the idea. That is endgame. That most likely will happen. That is the natural progression of these two things we're comparing to each other. But without fail, it would seem that the perception of child babies, fetuses, and what have you being an inconvenience to a woman yet perseveres, because they're pests, apparently. Why do people do this? Why is this something that occurs, that is touted by these people, these individuals that I am talking about? These examples which I have brought to the table. Literally, it's a reaction to another justification that they're toting, and that one being the my body, my choice justification, or the bodily autonomy argument. Quote, to To those against abortion, women who can have children are the only group of people asked to give up their bodily autonomy for any reason. You can't take organs from a corpse without express permission. To reiterate, we allow dead people more control over their body than women. But this Twitter user isn't quite done yet with their rambling. She went on even farther down this rabbit hole in an effort to defend her justification, in an effort to essentially preempt the inevitable reaction to her justification, the one that I'm toting right now. And don't at me with this, but it's not just your body. A fetus is more of a parasite than a human before 20 weeks. You couldn't make me give blood to my brother if I was the only person on Earth who could save him. You don't get to say whether I give up my bodily autonomy for 9 months. An interesting take. I will say that. However, it is far from the gotcha moment that she is hoping for. As I've already explained, baby is not a parasite. That is because the inevitable result of a fetus coming to fruition results in a fully formed human who can feed themselves and clothe themselves and all that jazz. I've explained this. The last line she uses, you don't get to say whether I give up my bodily autonomy for 9 months. No one, not a single person, has to say anything. That's the beauty of this. The courts don't have to say that you should give up your bodily autonomy. Pro-lifers don't have to do it because you already did, lady. You see, this is how it works. In consummating an act of coitus with another person of the opposite gender, so long as it is consensually done, you are, in essence, accepting the risk, no matter how small, nor how much you try to preempt that risk with birth control and condoms and ovulation timing and the infamous pull-out method. This action has the potential to result in a pregnancy. You acknowledge that. Everyone does when they have sex. But Weebo! Somebody else finally said it. Pregnancy is basically 9 months of growing a parasite until it's not parasitic. A fetus and its mother is basically a parasitic relationship on top of that. And I say this often, pregnancy and birth are fucking horrible. Wow. You really made me reconsider. I had no fucking idea that birth and pregnancy, a consequence of literally one possible physical action, were horrible. You got me. Listen, folks, in an age where affirmative consent vocalized and signed and initialized on the dotted line is something pushed to the forefront of the sexy time conversation, I get that today's generations don't get the subtle nuances of consent that present themselves as a result of such shenanigans, but I will walk you through this. I will handhold you. All right? A penis and a vagina doing this equals baby. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk, ladies and gentlemen. I can't wrap my head around how these people can exist at the same time and likely in the same political sphere, sometimes with the same, even the same philosophy that has to do with the absolutism when it comes to bodily autonomy. I mean, when we have nappy consent, where children should be given the power to consent to having their diapers changed, and robot consent, in a world where we ponder the important life questions of, can robots have bodily autonomy and consent to sex? And it's not all ridiculous stream fodder for your favorite daytime YouTube production shows. Oh, no. Newsflash, ladies and gentlemen, dehumanizing people actually has real-world consequences, believe it or not. Remember a few weeks ago, the New York state legislation that adjusted the legal standing of abortion in that state? Accused murderer spared abortion charge thanks to Cuomo's new law. Whoop-de-doo! Quote, prosecutors initially included a charge of abortion against the Queens man arrested Friday in his pregnant girlfriend's murder, but rescinded it because of Governor Andrew Cuomo's new Reproductive Health Act. Queens District Attorney Richard Brown sent out a press release saying Anthony Hobson, 48, would be charged with second-degree abortion, as well as murder in Sunday's fatal stabbing of Jennifer Irigoyen, 35. But a DA spokeswoman later told the Post that the abortion charge was repealed by the legislature, and this is the law as it exists today. Job well fucking done, lads. Slow fucking clap for you.
Now that's what this is all about.
Who could have seen this coming? I wonder. It's likely that these are the same people who have the unmitigated audacity to insinuate that pro-lifers are the heartless ones. Sorry. No. I am not shouldering that nonsense. None of it. You cannot make me question the righteousness of my position with a woeful whataboutism involving children that are out of the womb already and strawmanning, people with your own lazy designs. Not when there are people who literally dehumanize fetuses as parasites in an effort to justify the removal of them in terms of abortion. I can attempt to reconcile a lot of different positions and tolerate a lot of nonsense and fucketry, but in this instance, I have a bit of a bias, and I'm not gonna lie about it. Until a fetus is born, it's just a parasite, and we have a right to remove parasites from our body. Don't at me. Get fucked. If you like what I'm doing here, feel free to check out the links in the description to my Amazon, Subscribestar, Patreon, PayPal, and the link to my Redbubble store where you can find unique exclusive Weebo merchandise. My P.O. box can also be found below if you'd like to send me stuff in the mail. Also, please consider leaving a like, a comment, sharing the video, and subscribing to the bell for more. If you want to see more of me in a different capacity, I have a second channel called Weebo Incognito dedicated to ripping apart all things entertainment. I do a LARPy comedy stream show called Side Quest over on Magog of Morscar's livestream channel, and I do a bi-weekly stream show called Two Girls One Stream with segments for news, advice, call-ins, fanfiction read-throughs, and more on Some Dumb Americans channel. Links to all that jazz down in the description down below.